So, Geanina, what do you think about regulatory keeping up with technology?
Thank you so much for the introduction, Krenguța, and thank you, Poltavskluver and 360 Degrees for inviting me to this event. I'm really honored to be talking in this panel with a set of amazing women, to be honest. And to your question, Krenguța, I think it's really interesting that it's not the first time that technology is changing the way people are working. It's not the first time that people are afraid of introduction of technology into our lives. We've been experiencing this before, and somehow mankind typically manages to just walk alongside technology by just trying to redesign the way we are working and the way we are just working with each other. Of course, we've been dreaming of this world powered by AI, which will help us to make our work more efficient, to reduce the time we spend working, and so on, and increasing the quality of everyday's work, of everyday services. And it goes way beyond just work. It goes to the field of healthcare, of innovation, of education, and stuff that is very powerful and it's very important for our development as mankind. However, what we're seeing recently that we haven't seen before is that regulation cannot keep up with technology. And why is that? It's because the incremental steps that were done so far are now moving at such a fast pace that no one can keep up. So we've been seeing the EU and the US struggling to really get their grasp on enacting fair regulation with a dynamic mindset that so far has been surpassed by the move of technology. One approach would be sandbox regulation, allowing companies and allowing AI players around the world to just play with AI in a fair framework of policies that are enacted and in close connection with EU and US and international bodies. That would help a lot. It will help redesign the way regulation works. Regulation shouldn't be just a set of terms and conditions with associated sanctions, but rather guiding steps for companies, for people, and helping them cope with innovation and with what technology stands for. And I think that by imposing regulatory sandboxes rather than strict and stripped of dynamics regulations, that would help with moving on technology.
Thank you so much. I was wondering, listening to you, how do you think that the regulatory bodies prevent misuse of emerging technology?
That's a very interesting question, and the first response that we would be we would arguably have is enforce regulation, but that's not it. To my point, that's not it. What I see is a lack of, there's conversation between regulatory bodies and companies. There is some conversation, but I think the partnership side is what is missing right now. As we've seen with
I think we lost you for a second. So would you
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yes. Great. So sorry. Speaking of technology, it is bound to fail us at times. So just to resume my point, there is some conversation between regulatory bodies and companies. However, the problem is that we are failing to have a partnership. So we've seen with a lot of regulation that are very impactful and very global that they are not seeing the complexities of how work is being done, how strategies are being built by companies. So I think that's the key. Having regulatory bodies, having the European Commission, for instance, really partnering up with companies that are using technology for the greater good, that would contribute a lot to how the regulation would look like, how fair would the AI would be, and so on. And I think one key point, and to Mrs. Bruder's point earlier, an algorithm bias resides in a data sets used for training. Now, Mrs. Bruder, and the reason why we're here today on the 8th of March is that women should be a bigger part, should play a bigger role in the AI workforce. And I think that's where the regulatory bodies can look at. If you want to use fair and ethical AI, you really need to look at the people developing the AI, the data sets used to train the AI. And this is what we're not seeing right now. Policies to introduce women into the workforce and into the need of what AI development is. And the narrative with the EU so far is that the EU should not copy-paste everyday bias into AI algorithms. And the use of AI algorithms could perpetuate and even stimulate the biases that are intrinsic to our society today. But what about global society? Because we're looking at it from a very narrow perspective. What the US is looking from their perspective, EU as well, and other countries from unilateral perspectives as well. But we are living in a globalized world, and this is not a truth that we can avoid. So as opposed to decades ago, countries at the opposite sides are more connected than ever. Services created in the EU may affect citizens across the globe and vice versa. Is looking at narrowed societal diversity, as limited as that may be, enough to tackle generalized bias and diversity constraints? I would argue that it isn't. So I think regulatory bodies have a critical, of course, mission into driving fair AI into the market, and that is make sure that you have the proper people working with AI, and make sure that the regulatory bodies across the globe are connected to each other and enforce regulations that are useful across the globe, not just in a particular region.
Thank you. So I take that interconnection. It's something that you feel is missing today in the envisaged regulatory space. Is there anything else missing that you might think of, possibly using the opportunity of today to give the hint to those that might help in the first panel?
Yes, of course. As Mrs. Bruder said, I think we really need to get women involved into today's technology development. And I know there's so much talent, and everyone knows there's so much talent at this side of the world, but for some reason it's not being used at its full potential.
Thank you, Geanina, and I hope that this will change in the future to the benefit of all.